In the 1950s, audiences accepted a level of artifice that the audiences in 1966 would chuckle at, and the audiences of 1978 would chuckle at what the audience of 1966 said was okay. The trick is to try to be way ahead of that curve so they're not chuckling at your movies 20 years down the line. Quentin Tarantino, the boss.
Atop the battlements of Castle Curmudgeon, where we mark the beginning of that one magical week each year when your relatives come over to your house and eat all your food and drink all your beer and scream at each other about politics. Good evening, Mr. and Mrs. America, and all ships at sea. Welcome to the Blast Radius. So good to have you with us tonight. Coming up on the Worst People in the Whole Wide World Weekly Update. Hollywood completes its worst box office summer since 1981, but still steadfastly refuses to acknowledge the possibility that nobody wants to see their movies because their movies suck. The COP30 Climate Cult Summit, which is a rather farcical event, even in the best of times, descends even further into the realm of farce amid a wave of indigenous protests, bureaucratic backstabbing, and overflowing toilets. Travis Head, clearly seeking to take revenge upon this reporter for those terrible insults I leveled at him in my Eminem parody song, shoves a dagger in England's heart and single-handedly carries those dirty kangaroo fucking Australians to victory on the second day of the first Ashes Test match. Yes, I said the second day, which shouldn't even be possible. Has the whole world gone mad? Why, yes, it quite possibly has. And in a stunning display of transphobic bigotry, former low-rated MSNBC hostess and current low-rated YouTuber Joy Reid controversially declares that she is not a huge fan of big swinging dicks in the ladies' locker room. But first, it's time to check in with our very good friends across the pond in the jolly old Islamic Republic of Britannistan, where Prime Minister Keir Starmer said this week, in so many words, that the artist formerly known as Prince Andrew, Duke of York, probably should be compelled to come to the United States and publicly testify before Congress in the matter of the deceased child sex trafficker Jeffrey Epstein. The Prime Minister declined to give a direct answer when asked a direct question, because of course he did, but he did offer the following wonderfully vague and delightfully incoherent statement. Quote, I don't comment on his particular case, but as a general principle I've held for a very long time is that anybody who has got relevant information in relation to these kind of cases should give that evidence to those that need it, end quote. It reads almost like a Kamala Harris quote, or a Michael Scott quote even. Sometimes I'll start a sentence and I don't really know where it's going. I just hope I find it along the way. One of those. The former prince and former duke, now known as Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, Drew from Norfolk to his friends, has ignored repeated requests from the House Oversight Committee to provide transcribed testimony regarding his very chummy relationship with the late Mr. Epstein, which has led to calls from some congressional Democrats to subpoena him and seek the help of the British government in having him forcibly dragged across the Atlantic to answer their questions in person in a public forum. Back when he was a prince and a royal duke, this probably would have been kind of a tall order to achieve. But now that he's plain old Drew from Norfolk, an unemployed pensioner who sleeps in a spare room at his brother's house, maybe it's not such a tall order after all. Maybe Drew from Norfolk is about to start discovering that life as a non-entitled commoner is the gift that keeps on giving. And speaking of gifts that keep on giving, for those of us who toil in the vineyard of the comical and the absurd, the congenital lack of self-awareness on the part of the people who run the motion picture industry tends to always provide such a gift. Survive till 25. That used to be the big Hollywood mantra. Sure, things have been pretty bad since the start of this decade, so the thinking went, but our big turnaround is going to happen in the summer of 2025. That's when we can put all these difficulties behind us and get back to our former glory. That is when our long national nightmare will end and we can get back to making money hand over fist. And it wasn't just the studios that were self-medicating with massive doses of irrational optimism. It was the theater chains, too. Here's what Adam Aron, chief executive of AMC Entertainment, North America's largest theater chain, said to a group of industry analysts back in May. Quote, "We believe that a dramatic reawakening of the industry-wide domestic box office has begun, and this summer we're going to have barn burners, one after another," end quote. Summer of 2025 is going to fix everything, guys. Just look at this slate of movies we got coming out. There's no possible way this can go wrong. Except, yeah, it went wrong. Disastrously wrong, in fact. Instead of the best summer box office in recent memory that they were expecting and banking on and confidently predicting, they got the worst summer box office since 1981, which led the New York Times to ask earlier this week, is it time for Hollywood to concede that a lot of moviegoers in North America are never coming back? That movie theaters have permanently lost 20 to 25% of their customers? Spoiler alert, yes. Yes, it is. But the Times still doesn't get it, and the studios still don't get it. They still want to blame this consistent pattern of failure on the pandemic that ended 4 years ago, and streaming platforms and home entertainment systems and all of the usual suspects. But hey, idiots. People have been able to watch movies at home with a nice picture and nice sound for what, around 40 years now? And it never affected the viability of movie theaters. People stopped going to the movie theater when the movie industry decided that it hated half of its paying customers and wanted to start lecturing them about what terrible people they are. People stopped going to the movie theater when 95% of movie stars decided to become sanctimonious scolds who love to castigate the public for not having the correct ideas and opinions. And people stopped going to the movie theater when nearly all movies started being disposable trash with visuals that are all computer generated and scripts that might as well be. When movies and the people who make them are primarily concerned with wagging a finger in your face and telling you what you should think and how you ought to live, they wind up being no different than the climate cult. And as long as we're on the subject of industries that are rapidly failing and have little public credibility left to wield, that brings us nicely along to the COP30 summit, the big annual UN shindig where a bunch of political and diplomatic bigwigs fly in on their private jets and pretend to deeply care about atmospheric CO2 emissions. Then they spend a week or 10 days exhausting the local supply of prostitutes and narcotics. Then they complete the festivities by having a very self-congratulatory closing ceremony where they all pretend that humans can directly manipulate planet-wide atmospheric conditions by scribbling their names on pieces of paper. This year's edition of the event was held in some shitty little town on the edge of the Amazon rainforest in Brazil, the reason for which is anybody's guess. But there must have been a very limited supply of prostitutes and narcotics because everyone was in a pretty crabby mood by the time this thing ended. Did that have anything to do with the fact that none of the toilets in the hotel worked? Hard to say, but it couldn't have helped. When the event kicked off, the big controversy was over the fact that the United States had not sent a delegation down there, which means obviously that Donald Trump is a very evil, very bad orange man who wants everyone to die a miserable, agonizing death when the global mean temperature increases by 0.8 of 1 degree at some indeterminate future date. But hey, when you're living in a world where the global climate can be directly manipulated by bureaucrats scribbling on pieces of paper, I guess you are inherently susceptible to all sorts of intellectual flights of fancy. Meanwhile, the proceedings were interrupted on several occasions by representatives of Brazil's indigenous tribes staging protests, blocking roads, harassing delegates, doing the things protesters do. What were they protesting against? Unclear. Maybe they're pissed off that those dastardly Europeans showed up 400 years ago and disrupted their blissful Stone Age existence by introducing them to insidious, destructive innovations like the wheel and agriculture and written language. But I don't know, call me crazy, but it seems like there are still millions of square miles of uncharted Amazon rainforest that they could retreat back into if their traditional ways are that all-fired important to them. It seems like they just want the government to give them free stuff when you get right down to it. So maybe they have acclimated themselves to modern society better than they give themselves credit for. Or maybe they just don't want to live around people who think girls can have penises, which, quite improbably, gives them something in common with our old friend Joy Reid, who made a dramatic break with woke orthodoxy this week when she proclaimed that she would rather not see dudes waving their wedding tackle around in the ladies' locker room. While appearing on an episode of the Read This, Read That podcast hosted by someone named Jackie Reid, no relation apparently, and also, I am calling for a total and complete shutdown of people turning their own names into a cute little pun and making that pun the name of their podcast until our leaders can figure out what the hell is going on. The two Ms. Reids were discussing a much publicized incident last month at a Gold's Gym in Los Angeles when a writer and comedian by the name of Tish Hyman was caught on a piece of viral video loudly complaining about an alleged transgender woman waving his tallywhacker around in the ladies' locker room. And no, ladies and gentlemen, it did not escape my attention that when you've got a woman named Hyman complaining about a penis, the jokes practically write themselves. A hymen and a penis walk into a bar. Only one walks out. Hey now. And that's the long and short of it, folks. All right, I'll stop now. Here, in all of its galaxy brain intellectual glory, is the full quote from Joy Reid in response to Jackie Reid's opening penis monologue, which is a lot like a vagina monologue, except you can't put somebody's eye out with a vagina monologue. And I think she's talking here about her days at MSNBC, so apparently she's been a closeted transphobic monster for quite some time, and who knew? Quote, I would always change in like a private room because I'm not trying to change in front of people like that. I don't need people to see me naked and then see me in the hallway later. But then I would come out of my little private dressing room and there would be women walking around. I'm talking about women walking around with their boobies dangling, swinging in the breeze. And it's not even like perky boobies, just boobies drooping to their knees. They kicking their boobies down the street and they want to walk up and have a conversation with you. And I'm like, don't walk up to me with no clothes on and talk to me. I don't want to talk to you. End quote. Now, call me crazy here, but I feel like a woman in her mid-50s isn't in much of a position to be telling other people they've got dangly boobies. And speaking of people with dangly boobies, Travis Head may look more like a diabetic truck driver than a professional athlete, but it has to be said, he made the England boys his bitch yesterday. And I maintain that he was clearly motivated by those unflattering things I said about him in that parody song. If you think Test cricket isn't an action-packed sport, you did not see this Test match. 19 goddamn wickets fell on the first day. Couldn't even get up for a bathroom break without wickets falling. The bowlers are having a field day, both sides. It's a bloodbath for the batsmen. The bloodbath continues into the second day. England are all out for 164 by the time we get to the lunch break. Australia need 205 to win, which seems like an unassailable number the way this match has gone up until now. But then Travis Head waddles out to the middle. He cinches up his sports bra, pulls his trousers up over his giant beer gut, and he just starts raking. He drops 123 off 83 deliveries, which in Test cricket is a pretty unconscionable scoring rate, especially on a pitch where the bowlers have been totally dominating up to that point. And you know who's really bummed? Are the people who traveled to Australia just for this match and bought a ticket for day 3 or day 4 or day 5. In terms of the number of balls bowled, it's the shortest Ashes Test match since 1888, first one since 1921 to be completed on the second day. And if you're the Australian Cricket Board, talk about mixed emotions. You're happy your team won, obviously, but at the same time, you want to jump out the freaking window when you think of the 3 days of ticket revenue and TV revenue you just lost from the first match of the most prestigious series in the sport. ending on day 2. So yes, Travis Head, you are one of the worst people in the world. That's why I put you in the update. But even still, I grudgingly tip my cap to you and your beer gut and your man boobs and your double chin and your stupid porn mustache. You bastard. All right, I think I'm done now. This has been the WPWWWW for the 23rd of November, 2025. Thanks ever so much for your kind attention. I now transmit you into the firm but loving embrace of my distinguished colleague, your illustrious co-host, the one and only, your friend and mine, Mr. Caucasian Sasquatch.
Tactical nuke incoming!
Who muted my mic? Anyway, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Blast Radius. Tonight, we're going to get around to the movie we didn't get to last week, and I have a nightmare scenario on tap over here we're going to check out. Care of Mrs. One Gabriel Torch, and you know how much we love her chiclet teeth. Not sure she's an actual person. She might even be an AI, but it's one of those where they just didn't get it quite right. If you haven't seen, what was it? Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. That's correct. Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Watch it. It has absolutely no accuracy. There is no historical value. There is absolutely nothing there worth your time as far as a narrative at all. The only thing that's there is some damn good writing, some excellent character acting, and Kato gets smashed into a car by Brad Pitt. It's absolutely beautiful.
I think it's the best movie of this century, personally, or at least the last 20 years.
I mean, there's the Glorious Bastards, though. I mean, that
also a Tarantino picture, if we're getting down to it.
And honestly, The Hateful Eight is also this century, bro.
Also a Tarantino picture.
I know. There's going to be a lot of those on this list, bro. I can't help that. I can't help
it was
that.
It was a really splendid experience the first time I watched Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, because I didn't know anything about it whatsoever. I just knew it was the latest Tarantino picture, and I now had access to it. So I started watching it, and the moment at which I realized what it was about was when Cliff has just dropped off Rick at his house, and he takes back off in his little car to go to his little trailer he lives in with his dog Brandy by out behind the drive-in, and he's screaming down the road and turns onto the other street, and they pull back and you see the sign that says Cielo Drive. And then it all dawns on me right at once. Oh my God, this is Charles Manson alternate history right here. I'm so excited right now. This is going to be fun.
So I didn't catch the alternate history part at first. I knew that it was wrong because I was like, I'm not going to lie. Typically, the way I do this is I'll put the movie on once and let it play kind of in the background while I'm doing whatever I'm doing. And then I'll sit down and watch the movie the second time with a little bit of knowing what's coming and what to pay attention to and what I've already missed kind of thing. And it lets me digest a movie more completely than I would if I just sat through it once, right? In this case, I was actually sitting there texting somebody, trying to make arrangements for a show for someone, and I looked up and there was some random dude in Homeboy's driveway, and he's like, "Hey, where's so-and-so?" It's like, "Oh, they moved out." "Where'd they move to?" "Over across town over there." "Okay, cool. Y'all hold it down." And he leaves, and I'm sitting there and I'm like, I'm almost positive I read a police report of the Tate murders where they actually ran like pretty good chance that it was Charlie Manson that made the meeting with the neighbor, and that was picked up in one of the little dragnet questionings that went down after the murders. I couldn't remember who.
That's one of the things where they hew very closely to the actual history. They really hew pretty accurately to the history in every aspect of it in which Cliff Booth and Rick Dalton are not involved.
To a point. What really upset me though was the fact that up to this point I had not noticed. I just looking at the cars, looking at the clothes, looking at the music, looking at everything that's been going on. It's the right time period. I'm almost positive that's the right gate. I mean, I'm almost certain we are at least within a block or two of the Tate murders, but I was unaware that the movie was actually directly related to that. I was just watching the movie, and then the closer it got to the night of the murders, the more I'm going, but none of this is quite right. This is, and then I realized, wait a second, it's a fairy tale.
Exactly. Yep. It is. He drives that message home with that little song he plays over the start of the closing credits when he really wants, it's alternate history, but it's also a fairy tale. And I think the genesis of the whole project was a confluence of two things. One of which was that he wanted to make a picture that was kind of a love letter to the bygone version of Los Angeles that he remembers growing up in as a little kid. And it was also just imagining out loud, what if Sharon Tate got to have a happy ending? What if the good guys won that night? What if evil didn't prevail?
Since you've already brought that up, I was going to save that for the end of this wrap up, but you just said it out loud. This is a happy ending, but let me point out what this happy ending entails. This happy ending entails a person being killed by a dog, a person being killed by a knife, beaten half to death, all over the freaking place, another person being kidnapped, and a third person being literally barbecued alive and then drowned.
And the other common
ending.
And the other common thread that you have running through the entire narrative is the fact that Cliff Booth, the stuntman, is the actual action hero. And yes. the actor hero, Rick Dalton, is just a bumbling doofus who comes in right at the last minute and steals all the glory after the stuntman has done all the difficult work, which we see, in the climactic scene when all the bad guys get killed. Cliff is the one who has to do all the killing, and then, once the chick is half dead in the swimming pool, then Rick gets to go grab his flamethrower and have the final climactic glory. And it's what a great storytelling device it is.
Sure. I mean, I love it. And here's the thing that really got to me on the second watching through it. I was really impressed by the dedication with which this stuntman approached this whole thing. He was perfectly fine doing all of the hard work. Even he was cutting the grass. He was adjusting the freaking antenna on the roof. He was chasing down people in the middle of the night that came by and bothered the guy. He was your everyday go-to-it handyman special. He was on tap, on tag, and on point at every point.
And he's fantasizing about that time he kicked Bruce Lee's ass.
Well, I mean, I've every red-blooded American over 6'2" has looked at me and went, I don't know, man.
There's some people who think, the kind of people who think way too deeply about movies. In other words, who think that the entire movie is just Cliff Booth's fantasy, and they point specifically to the scene where he kicks Bruce Lee's ass. And I never thought about it until I went back and watched it after reading a few of these theories. But it's not an unfair point they make, because when that Cliff Booth versus Bruce Lee fight first starts, there's all kinds of people standing around watching, like, probably 2 dozen people. And then each time you go back to the wide shot, there's a few less people and a few less.
Well, they're leaving.
And by the time you get to the end of the fight, there is nobody there anymore.
Because they're leaving. They don't want to be present.
And
when Bruce Lee dies.
It could just be that they are leaving, or, like I said, I don't really buy the theory, but it's an interesting thing to think about. I think they're getting too much into it. And yes, the most obvious explanation is that they are just leaving because the producer's coming and they don't want to get in trouble, or they have to be on set for whatever. But it also could be that he is just imperfectly remembering an event from his past while he's standing there smoking a cigarette on this rooftop.
Right. I can see that. I'd have to take a look at the theory specific, but I really dig the theories that make a movie into a more cerebral experience than it usually would be. And one of them is built into this movie. It's the cigarette he picks up from the 12-year-old. One of the Manson girls.
Oh yeah, the acid dipped cigarette.
Right. Which she got for like 75 cents, right? Like, wow. I kept expecting him to smoke that cigarette by accident.
Yeah, and
the other guy, yeah.
Yes, that is exactly the expectation that one gets when we keep seeing that cigarette pop up every so often. You think he's going to smoke it by accident, but he doesn't. He smokes it on purpose. And then when he's tripping his balls off, he has to kill the fucking Manson family.
Right?
bash a chick's head into bash her face into a fireplace mantle, and after he's been
I just want to say,
obviously, but yeah, but there you go. The stunt.
Can you imagine it though? There you are, tripping balls, and some dude comes in the front door with weapons and chicks, and there's a chick at the back door, and suddenly you're in a fight for your life. But that's okay because you're America's stuntman, and you've got skills, and so essentially, you do the same thing to them that you were about to do to Kato. I don't know if you can hear me, brother, but I think we've lost you completely. Drop out and pop back in, I guess. It's an excellent frame, though. That was a very good freeze frame. Usually you look dumb as hell when you had to catch a freeze frame, but he's always lucky as all get out. His freeze frames look great. Amazing. All right, I've got a little shot.
Mind-reading devices can now predict preconscious thoughts.
Yeah. I got a question. This is for all of chat. This is for everybody involved, right? So, oh no.
Mind-reading.
All right. So here we are, right? Welcome back, brother.
Sorry about that.
It's all my fault. I'm the producer. I'm supposed to fix that crap. Blame me. So we've got Miss Gabriel Torch over here. Miss. I'm assuming Miss. She doesn't look like the reproducing type. She looks kind of vegan and like she might need a bacon sandwich.
Very vegan. Yeah, she needs significantly more protein in her life.
I'd like to give her some protein myself, but
I knew you were going to say. God damn it! I knew you were going to say that.
Well, if you're going to set one up like that, bro, how dare you, sir? But yeah, no, she's not a bad looking girl. I don't know if I can look her straight in the teeth. But anyway, last week I brought you the wonderful idea that they're wanting to utilize either human or monkeys, chimpanzees specifically, if I'm not mistaken, brain organoids to operate NPCs in MMOs, massive multiplayer, games. And I'm curious what your thoughts are on whether or not those NPCs are people now. I mean, they're made of people stuff, right?
They are in theory. Oh, I guess not just in theory. They are literally made of people stuff.
They're made of people stuff.
So I guess if we're operating under a purely materialistic definition, then they would have to be regarded as at least partially humanoid, let's say.
Yeah, well, I mean, they'd be electronic, electrical life forms, perhaps.
Yes, they are digital life forms that had their genesis in biological life forms. And I guess these are the sorts of questions that we're going to have to start grappling with more and more as history marches on.
Right. So this young lady has gone and found another tidbit of absolutely terrifying science that has me literally shaking in my boots. I don't wear boots, but if I were, I would be, right? And there's a little bit of a digression here. It's only 3 minutes, so shouldn't be too bad. But I want you to really think about this phrase: pre-conscious decisions, pre-conscious action, right? The idea that something is decided before you decide it's decided because something within you made the decision before you got around to making the decision. That warps my brain.
Yes, and some entity external to your consciousness can decide you were going to make that decision. Which is the part where it gets kind of terrifying.
Right, because if you carry that into a religious connotation, then it becomes a question of free will and whatnot. If you carry that into a purely materialistic question, it
And
begs
if you
the
ca-
question.
and if you carry it into a governmental context, it is going to result inevitably, just like in that Tom Cruise movie, in people being arrested for crimes they didn't even know they were going to commit.
Right, but she's fixing to explain to us A, how it's the most terrifying thing to ever grace the face of the earth, and B, how you don't really need to worry about it. Are you ready?
I am ready. Lay it on me.
Devices can now predict preconscious thought, meaning they can figure out what you're going to do before you do it, should you be concerned. In case you're unfamiliar, a brain-computer interface is just anything that connects your brain to a computer. It can include some things that are non-invasive, like EEG.
Oh yeah, there, Mister Curmudgeon. Uh, I want you to know that when you freeze framed out earlier, you look very distinguished. It's
Did I? That's an upset.
very distinguished. In fact, I would go and use that for my avatar. Anytime. I'm serious. It looked like you were in the middle of a very deep thought. It was very respectful, and that never happens. So there's that.
G-caps, and those are pretty cool. It can also include chips that go directly in your brain. Those can span from a single electrode or hundreds or even thousands. And now we're seeing them being placed in multiple areas of the brain with pretty interesting effects, including some emergent behaviors. I was also pretty surprised to see something that looked like a shock title in Nature, which is the highest paper in the land. Basically, if you are in biology and you publish in Nature, your career is set. You're the best of the best. So this did surprise me, but we'll get into it. Brain-computer interfaces can do more than they ever have before in just a few years. People are walking and talking and even being able to experience touch when they've lost the ability to feel anything from the neck down. They can even feel it through somebody else's body. This is because we can give people virtual experiences. If we can control the electrical activity in the brain, it doesn't have to be one way. It can go both.
And this is your next Isekai novel. Let me tell you.
And
They're
to me, that's the really cool part about these brain computer interfaces, because we've had the ability for quite a while now in terms of prosthetic limbs to operate the limb according to electrical impulses that are emanating from the, whatever stump remains, after the amputation.
Right.
But now we are going directly to the brain and cutting out the middleman pretty much, and operating that prosthetic limb just by thinking about it. You don't even need to send the electrical impulses to the stump anymore, and that's a pretty huge divide that we have crossed in just a fairly short number of years.
That's true, but there's more to it than that. It doesn't have to be to a limb. The limb can now be an instrument or a game or a character in a game or any number of variations on that theme.
And like she was just saying a moment ago, the artificial prosthesis now has the ability to be tactile in the same way that a fully natural body part would be. And of course, when you have to consider the worst case scenario when you're thinking about these things, and inevitably that is going to result, just like the people in the freaking, what was it, the Boba Fett show, the terrible Boba Fett show on Disney Plus, where these kids had all modified their bodies and chopped off their limbs on purpose and replaced them with something more awesome and more useful and with more deadly potential.
Right. It's wild. Transhumanism is just a wild concept, and this is exactly the nature of things moving forward. And one of the things I have an issue with is the fact that you hear people talking about, oh, we're 20 years away, we're 15 years away, we're this many. There's so many different technological hurdles that have to be crossed, but in reality, the only real technological hurdle that has to be crossed is battery power for the autonomous unit, right? Some form of power dense matrix that it can carry for years rather than hours. And then a high speed data relay between the unit and the supercomputer that would be operating its AI. And
also when people predict that things are going to happen in 15 or 20 or 25 or 30 years, there is often a self-importance bias inherent in those projections, because people people like to imagine that things are going to take place in their own lifetime, even when they're almost certainly not. People don't like to imagine that something's going to happen in 200 or 300 or 1,000 years. They want to be around for it. And so that kind of colors their prognostications oftentimes.
True. But there's another layer here that really bothers me. You don't have to have all of the breakthroughs in the same discipline. You simply have to have specific breakthroughs that go from human thought processing to being in a robot body, regardless of how that lands, whether it's an AI transition, an augmented reality transmission, or whatever it ends up being. It might be the Ender's Game method where you've got one person running these little bots that are fighting a war, and the bots are all fighting the war over there, and all the people over here are just operating the bots, and that's how they fight wars. I don't see it.
And as often happens in the realm of technology and innovation, the biggest leaps and the biggest, most earth-shattering inventions might be completely accidental, and they might take place in a completely different realm of science, and versus where their application actually winds up being. That's happened all the way down through history. That's been happening for centuries now. Many of the things that we most rely on and most take for granted were invented completely by accident when somebody was trying to invent some other thing.
Magic mirror on the wall. Who's the fairest of them all? And the magic mirror exists on your wall today, most of them sitting over what used to be a fireplace.
Yeah, and you can simply yell a set of instructions across the room to no one in particular, and there's a little device over on the shelf that does the thing you wanted it to do. Even though I can't stand those things, I have no desire to use them, but it's still impressive that they exist.
So if we can get AI, large language models, predictive reasoning algorithms, and the physical autonomous unit, which apparently Elon Musk is over here working on, in conjunction with someone, a paraplegic, quadriplegic type person, locked in, whatever, with the right accoutrement within his skull, that one individual, with the help of an AI, might be able to operate thousands of these things.
Yes. And the place that it's going to lead is that the super wealthy are going to want to live forever, because the super wealthy always want to figure out a way to live forever, and they are going to doggedly pursue some method whereby they can, transfer their consciousness into some non-biological entity or some such, and but that's going to be another big leap that probably won't happen, if it ever does, for thousands of years, I would submit, because we still are in our infancy as far as actually understanding the intricacies of the human brain. It's still the most sophisticated computer that we know of, and we don't have much of an idea how it actually works, much less how to make one continue to function, or a facsimile of it continue to function, in the absence of a functioning human body.
True. And I've submitted before, and I'll submit again, that the most likely pathway to that conclusion would be a infant or very young individual with one of these AI communicators embedded in the cerebral cortex, probably somewhere north of the amygdala, to kind of short circuit the fear response there. And for it to exist throughout the entire life of this organism and come out the other end believing itself to be all that's left of that organic organism that was alive. So Chuck, Bron Chuckson is my name, and it's been my name since I was born. Right? Because
our great grandkids are going to have some pretty serious medical ethics issues to grapple with, aren't they?
Oh God, yes. And our parents said the same thing about us. I mean, and we have, and it's been an issue. Let's see if we can finish this.
But I do have some qualms with it, like the bionic eyes fiasco. I've got a chip on my shoulder for this one because a company called Second Sight gave people their vision back by implanting a chip in their brain and allowing visual information to go from their eye to their brain when their eyes didn't work. However, they went out of business in 2020, and people's eyes slowly became obsolete as the materials degraded. People just lost their sight. Even not doing firmware updates resulted in people losing their sight. Also, good luck finding a doctor willing to remove it. There's also been cases in which people have had their medical implants removed when they did not want.
That is an interesting point. Good luck finding a doctor willing to remove it.
Exactly, because we have already sort of begun establishing ethical boundaries that we've decided we don't want to cross. And I guess the biggest and most obvious one of those is human cloning as of right now. And but you know that some underground operation in some country somewhere is working on it, and nobody knows, nobody has any idea, and they're nobody's going to find out until the first supposedly cloned human being is rolled out. But you might have imagined that there would have been less resistance to that in the abstract than there has actually wound up being in the reality.
Sure. I don't know, dude. I'm fairly resistant to the whole concept. I don't like the idea of putting computer things inside of people's, in most cases. I find it less than a desirable outcome, right? So,
Yes, as it is, because our mortality is the thing that makes us human. When you take that out of the equation, especially when you take it out of the equation just for a very small subset of the population, that's going to have ramifications that nobody can possibly imagine, and none of them are going to be good.
Facts. I mean, there will be some good. I can imagine all kinds of amazing things that can be done with this technology. The issue is, while it may be done, it'll only be done for the most. Oh, that's not right at all. Close enough for government work. It'll only be done by the most wealthy or those that are lucky enough to be near the whatever school or business or whatever, like these people here. They went in, they got their sight back, they were able to walk around seeing for 18 months, and then because the company itself went out of business, there was no more upgrade or anything to their technology. And so if no one's capable or willing to remove these things, does that mean it was an illegal operation in the first place?
And there's another ethical question to unwrap. I don't think there's a simple, easy answer for that. I don't think there's a simple, easy answer for any of these questions, really. But they're questions that we have to start thinking about, because they're going to get more and more pressing and more pertinent as time goes on. And there's going to come a day when we have to grapple with them directly, when they are sprung on us sooner than we ever imagined they would be. And if we actually get to a point, which could happen, where the super wealthy have access to some facsimile of immortality, you want to talk about a class divide? That's going to be the class divide of all class divides. That's going to be a class divide that trumps all other class divides put together. And it's the sort of thing. It's the sort of thing that could hasten the coming of a despotic one world government.
Yes, and for all time.
Yes.
The terrible. All right. If you've ever bothered to watch Altered Carbon, this is sort of a cautionary tale looking back on Methuselah's, the idea of immortal money and immortal wealth being carried ad infinitum into the future, with all of the super high tech, everything that goes with it, cloning, AI, body swaps, body doubles, copying, needle casting your way to different planets and whatnot, the whole nine, right? And it's still a dark and malevolent future. But let's just take it on its surface, and let's not go so far in the future that all of that has already taken place. But let's say that tomorrow Bill Gates figures out how to upload his thought process into one of his massive server farms, and that it actually works. We're talking transcendence here. It appears, for all intents and purposes, to be an exact mental clone of Bill Gates as he is right now. There's all kinds of questions that comes from this, but essentially we're now stuck with an immortal version of Bill Gates's thought process as a significant functioning factor in the advancement of Microsoft and various other computer tech. Good thing,
Yes.
bad thing,
And
well,
and
maybe.
a version of Bill Gates that never has to worry about getting old or dying. And you know, the obvious surface level implications of a thing like that are very dark and terrifying. But when you think about it in a different context, like let's think about it in terms of colonizing the galaxy. Once you've bridged the gap of immortality, and you can place a fully functional human consciousness into some type of artificial vessel, then you've defeated the biggest obstacle to colonizing the galaxy at sublight speed, because now you've got unlimited amounts of time. Except the entities, the creatures that are going to be doing the colonizing are not humans anymore, are they? You are colonizing the galaxy with machine intelligence.
I think this is one of those points in human history where we have to look to the sci-fi authors for our educated thought process moving forward.
And oftentimes they are better at it than the scientists are.
Well, it's not a matter of whether or not their predictions on what will, could, or have happened are accurate, but the logical effects from it having happened. So, with the assumption that we're going to use Bill Gates again, he successfully uploads himself to a server. That server is now his physical body, and the server, Bill Gates, starts protecting itself using the resources of the organic Bill Gates. Now, who's in charge? Is it the organic Bill Gates or is it the server Bill Gates? Would there be a disagreement in what needed to happen? I doubt
The server Bill Gates would want very badly to get rid of the organic Bill Gates, I would expect.
I don't think so. I think
No?
that the server Bill Gates would want to subvert the reality of organic Bill Gates by controlling his access to information through cell phones and computers and whatnot. I think he would just subvert him to its will. And it wouldn't even matter because the organic Bill Gates isn't smart enough to realize what's actually taking place. And he's an expert, and therefore hubris would be working against him.
And maybe that's one of the great filters. Maybe the bridge between biological intelligence and machine intelligence in terms of trying to transcend the one and make it into the other. Maybe that is one of the stumbling blocks that can't be gotten past. And maybe that's the reason why we don't see other galaxies that are fully colonized and full of Dyson spheres and so on. Maybe it's why we don't see maybe it's why everything we see when we look through our telescopes is perfectly natural. Because it would seem like if and when some other civilization was able to bridge that gap, even without faster than light travel, even without anything remotely close to faster than light travel, all you need is 1 million years to fully colonize a galaxy. If you're doing it with machine intelligences, that's not even that big of a problem anymore. If you don't have to worry about sustaining human life, are you kidding me? It becomes almost child's play at that point to colonize a galaxy. And yet, when we look out there, we see absolutely nothing.
That's true. I've come across a couple of theories on that. Some folks have been running the Drake equations, but utilizing different starting conditions. Right now, classically, you've got the dark forest paradox. You've got the freaking "it's a dangerous world" thing. You've got
the zoo hypothesis.
The zoo hypothesis, where they're just avoiding us. And then on top of all of that, the prison planet, of course, which is a modified zoo hypothesis.
Right.
Also, the very first species, that we are the first conscious race that has reached a level of space exploration to ask these questions. But what if, and stick with me on this, what if our corner of the universe just happens to be especially difficult to survive in? There's too much going on, too many stars being birthed and dying, and gamma ray bursts and solar flares. It's just a really hectic area of the galaxy. for
It could
many,
be.
many light years.
And as we know, in order for our planet to be in the place that it is today, in the set of conditions it's in, with us existing and gaining the ability to become a spacefaring species, it took a really, really incredible series of serendipitous events for that to happen. And, events that were all improbable on their own. And when you add the probability of all of them together, it's almost vanishingly unlikely that we should have wound up like this. There's the event that creates our moon. There's the series of events that create our solar system. We've got the gravitational vacuum cleaner of Jupiter that tends to keep us safe from big dangerous objects that might hit us, even though they still do from time to time. You've got the asteroid belt that serves that same function. You've got our 22.5-degree axial tilt. You take any single one of those things out of the equation, and we are not a spacefaring species right now. Even just the particular chemical composition of our atmosphere that enables us to take the gases the atmosphere is made of and turn it into rocket fuel, and we're able to get ourselves out of our own gravity well. I mean, all of those things are vanishingly improbable, and yet they all happened. So maybe everything is a function of that. However, you still can't dismiss out of hand the chance that we actually are the first spacefaring species in our galaxy.
That is true. There is another option here too. The last.
Or the last. Yep.
For some reason, something has eliminated intelligent life throughout the universe, and we are the first to re-evolve after a fashion. That's a little less likely, but I don't see why.
Right, and back to the conversation we were having last week, a conversation we've had a few times before, about the fact that if and when we should discover, evidence in space of what we would think of as extraterrestrial intelligence, that the fact that we would almost certainly discover it in the form of finding some defunct object or craft or device or some piece of space trash. But if we found something like that, how would we know that we didn't put it there? How would we know that our progenitors in some pre-human technological civilization that existed on this planet, or even one that existed on Venus or on Mars, put it there? Wouldn't that be far more likely than someone from a different star system bringing it here and putting it there?
Yes, as a matter of fact, it would. I would make the argument that the last 10,000 years of human progression hasn't been linear progression, and that had it been linear progression, there's little or no reason why we couldn't achieve the same level of technological capability we have now in 10 generations, rather than the 10,000 that we've had since the rise of the human thumb.
Yes, and we also know that a billion and a half, 2 years ago, there's a pretty high likelihood that Venus, Earth, and Mars were all habitable at the same time. So,
which is just a wild thought, by the way.
Oh, I know. And who's to say that the first spacefaring civilization didn't originate on Venus and put life here, or on Mars and put life here? Who's to say that the Venusians and the Martians didn't intentionally create the set of conditions on our planet that enabled us to evolve into what we are today?
I would make the argument that we are more likely to have come from Mars than we are from Venus. And the reason of that argument is this. Your vertical posture is absolutely retarded. As far as like trying to survive on Earth, our gravity is just heavy enough to make it dangerous to walk on 2 feet.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of weird that just walking around can kill you. That's not something most animals have to worry about. If they trip and fall, they don't usually die, right? If we evolved on Venus, if we trip and fall, we die. Same as we do here. It's close.
Yeah, we would probably be much stockier looking creatures if we evolved on Venus. But
I'm assuming Venus would have had a much more irrational orbit and like axial tilt and orbital rotation and stuff,
Yeah, and I mean, we have pretty good reason to believe, just as we do with Mars, that Venus used to have lots of liquid on its surface. So, and we know that the pretty much the opposite thing happened with the one and the other. Venus gained way too much atmosphere and a runaway greenhouse effect, and Mars lost its atmosphere. And you know, by opposite sequences of events, they both lost the liquid that was on their surface. But there is no reason to discount out of hand that they not only might have once been inhabitable at the same time, but even inhabited. Maybe all three planets were inhabited. Maybe the same civilization lived on all three. Maybe that civilization's space junk is still floating around somewhere up there waiting for us to find it. And what a mind blower would that be?
So that would kind of bring into consideration the Nords as a progenitor species. The stories of like Atlantis and whatnot coming straight out of the computer deck of these colony ships running back and forth. And that's a fairly complicated neighborhood when you're talking about it, because communication would only be convenient during certain times of certain conjunctions. And
Yep.
that's all very, very interesting. But I have a question.
Go for it.
How much do you know about the topography and the atmospheric makeup of Venus?
Not as much as I should. It's what 85% CO2, I believe it is.
It's
and
almost
obviously very, very crushing pressure. The pressure on the surface is such that the Soviets landed a couple of craft successfully on the surface, and they only were able to operate for like 10, 12, 15 minutes before they were just crushed to shit.
Well, that was less to do with as much to do with pressure as it was with surface temperatures where they landed. I've always thought they should have dropped it at the North Pole.
Yeah, because your surface temperature is like 900 something degrees, I believe.
Yeah, North Pole is like 400, but between 400 almost, it's smelting lead. Like,
oh yeah, yeah. It is not the garden spot of the solar system. That is for damn sure. But it's the only terrestrial planet that has as much of an atmosphere as we do. Except they've got way the hell more of it, and it's made of nasty stuff that would kill us.
Yes, but to get back to what I was getting at, there's a handful of sci-fi authors that have actually gone through the issues of what it would take, hypothetically, with the chemistry we have, and let's say we could just create these drones to go get the pieces that we need from the solar system and drop them off on Venus to neutralize the acids, drop the temperature. The real challenge, the real problem with Venus is its lack of rotation.
Yes.
Its rotation is so slow that temperatures are a couple of 100 degrees different from the sun side to the dark side. Also, its completely vertical tilt leaves it with virtually no seasoning whatsoever. There's the pressure, the acidity, the amount of carbonic acid in that thing is absolutely amazing. You're talking about a whole bunch of Alka-Seltzers to deal with this thing.
Carbon dioxide 96.5. So my guess was on the low side. Nitrogen 3.5. Then you got sulfur dioxide, argon, tiny bit of water, carbon monoxide, helium, neon, hydrogen chloride. These are all down to hydrogen fluoride. Those are all in trace amounts, obviously.
Right.
But you're right. It's the lack of rotation and the lack of a magnetosphere also would seem to be precluding factors.
All right. So there's one more. And it's really a deal breaker when it comes to this. There is no surface life on Venus for us because of this one factor. Venus has virtually no topography. Its surface is almost completely nondescript. If I remember right, there's only like 500 meters difference between the lowest point and the highest point, and they're kind of splotchy around the globe, and there's no real rhyme or reason to it. And it's just plateau or valley. That's it. So you're either on the high flat plane or you're on the low flat plane, and there's really no middle ground. That's all vertical shelf.
According to this, the highest spot on Venus is Scotty Mons, a peak within the Maxwell Mons mountain range with an altitude of about 35,000 feet above the planet's mean radius. This point is nearly 11 kilometers high and is higher than Mount Everest.
But there's not a whole lot going on with the features. You have a major mountain range here, you have plateaus there, you have the rest of it is all flat ground. What would be the bottom of an ocean if it was on Earth, what we would call an abyssal plain. But because this is a cosmically dead rock on the inside, it doesn't really seem to have a whole lot of internal functionality left in it. If it has a molten core, it's not spinning right. It's tidal.
Well, yeah, and just like on Mars, where there is no evidence of any plate tectonics of which to speak, which is why Olympus Mons and the other volcanoes in that chain are so spectacularly high. It's because the crust isn't moving independently of the mantle underneath the crust, so it's just erupting out of the same spot for millions and millions and millions of years, and so it builds up a volcano and a caldera that are like 30 miles high.
Right. And all of that being said, it makes Venus virtually untenable once you were to reduce or put enough chemicals into the atmosphere to neutralize the acids, free up breathable oxygen, reduce the various trace gases that are toxic, and to trap enough CO2 some kind of way in order to make just the atmosphere at the surface, tenable, right? We're not talking a paradise here. We're talking tenable. Over half the planet would be flooded, and the other half of the planet would be almost straight vertical cliffs.
Yeah, well, I think all of the ideas that have been put forth about human colonization of Venus have to do with living in balloons inside the clouds, which is probably untenable anyway, but it's the only feasible thing we've managed to come up with so far.
The thing about those balloons, as you call them, they don't necessarily have to be your classic inflatables like the way you think of them.
Right. It just needs to be some object that can achieve buoyancy in the context of that environment, which is very, very, very thick and nearly all CO2.
You're thinking of something more along the lines of a lightly plated space station type thing, something that would float more than it would be a ship. It would sail on a sea of clouds. Think Bespin, the Cloud City.
That's about what it would amount to.
All of this would be built with ultralight materials and all of that cool stuff, but would also be theoretically above a point where you could grow stuff. But then comes the question of the solar wind and the location on the planet itself that you would want to inhabit, right?
Right. And you're still going to be affected by the lack of a magnetic field, which is going to be a problem.
Right. Well, that's what I was saying about the solar wind, is that's going to create all kinds of havoc.
And to put the temperature and pressure in perspective, it says here that if you're standing on top of that 35,000 foot mountain, the surface temperature is only 716 Fahrenheit and the pressure is only 44 atmospheres. Right.
That's enough to bury your helmet and not worry about
the seriously.
So we're talking like power armor to go to the surface, and it's just not worth it. I can't think of a thing that would be down there that would be worthwhile. Although, consider this. These floating cities, if they could be accomplished, and the technology involved isn't that far if you're willing to build the whole thing as one big Faraday cage, right?
Right.
If you just start with the concept of we're going to be deviating solar particles from around us so that it doesn't get inside, you can just go ahead and design that into the process and probably use that to power some part of it. Because,
and it's also another case where if you're doing the colonization with some sort of transhuman post-biological creatures, then you don't even need to worry about any of that shit, and you're already golden. But if you want to do it with human beings, then it's a much more involved thing with much more considerations to take into account.
And it's also a location where Typically, human activities are viewed as a negative, but in this case, we would be utilizing the heat, the electronic swing of the atmospheric particles, and all of that stuff as being power generation methods. And you think about the concept of geothermal energy. Imagine if all you had to do is drop a freaking hydrogen pipe down, run some hydrogen through it, and get it out at 800 degrees on the other end, and it's just free power, dude. Just into the clouds.
I mean, what we would probably want to do in those cloud tops is make a big rocket fuel factory.
Something like that. I mean, it would have to be something useful. There would need to be a resource there that was valuable, something that was easily convertible or anything like that. Otherwise, there's no point in doing it at all. Venus is the wrong direction, and there's no point. Other than the technological capability of achieving it, there's no point in doing it. It doesn't.
But if you're at the point where you're making serious attempts to colonize the rest of the galaxy, then that's a direction you would probably want to think about going in, because as we know, you can't colonize the galaxy when you have to launch all your vehicles out of Earth's gravity well. That's just never going to be the bulldog. You have to figure out a way to do all this stuff in orbit and launch from orbit, because that's, the principles of energy conservation dictate that you have to do it that way.
That is one thing that Venus does have in spades. And while its location's a bit problematic, the circumstances are an issue, and it's definitely an engineering challenge. If I were to hand build a planet to have a space elevator on, it would look something like Venus.
Oh, yeah, because there your slow rotation speed becomes an advantage instead of an impediment.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And your counterweight could be something the size of freaking Pluto at that point, for all intents and purposes. And if you were to play that game just right, you might be able to jumpstart the mantle back to the core back to liquid if you were using a large enough counterweight and had enough balls to pull it off.
Yeah.
I don't know though. We're talking about technological advances that are at least a few hundred years in the future. We're talking about, and Mars. I've always said Mars is dead weight. Mars is a bad trip. I say we colonize the moon, and one or two Lagrange points between here and the moon, and we use that as our local neighborhood to gather all the near Earth asteroids for mining. Take whatever's useful, jettison the rest.
If we could gain the ability to attempt terraforming Mars, then we might be able to make it useful. But the process of the terraforming is going to take 10,000-15,000 years. So you have to be really invested in that project.
I'm not sure it's actually possible, dude. The gravity is just a hair too light there. You'd lose as much water vapor and oxygen and all the other trace gases, nitrogen being a major issue. You'd have to use something like, I don't know, what's that? What's one of the heavier?
But we know she had an atmosphere at one point.
Sure, and she had a mantle at one point, and she also had a crust, and the crust is currently floating around between Jupiter and Mars.
Right, and that and that's a powerful indication at what an important part of the process and the conditions for life is plate tectonics. It's exactly. One of those things. It's a deal breaker if you take it out of the equation, and if it stops, then you can go from a living world to a dead world, as Mars seems to have done.
Yep. And all of this is, of course, pie in the sky type of considerations, but smarter men than us have written vasty stories about just such things, and I see no problem in considering them. Let's take the longevity of the rich, right? Maybe they're not immortal, but they are functionally immortal. Rather than living, forever, they live, 3,000, 5,000 years, something like that. That's the projected lifespan. You wake up tomorrow and medicine has advanced far enough that the few people who can afford it will outlive your great-grandchildren. I predict a world government in 10 years.
Absolutely. That's I was just about to say the same thing. That is where you get permanent world government.
Right.
When the super wealthy have bridged the I don't want to say they've bridged the transhumanism gap, but they have bridged the gap to massively unnatural longevity. And yeah, that absolutely, that is where you get world government. Probably, like you say, it might only take 10 years, because that's a class divide that can't be imagined. Even compared to all the harsh and stark class divides that have existed down through human history, that's one that we can't even contemplate the effects it would have.
Yeah, no clue. It's been thought about. I mean, like I said, there are various sci-fi authors who have touched on it. Robert Heinlein being one of the, in my opinion, more well thought out versions. Arthur C. Clarke's version of it seemed to have been sort of like super communist concept, where there's a universal basic income and the computer knows what you're going to grow up and do best, and so you're just trained to do that, and you're happy because it chose right. It's Arthur C. Clarke's a wild pie in the sky kind of guy.
Yeah, which is kind of like the version of Krypton that we saw in Man of Steel, where nobody has sex anymore and babies are just grown in a baby farm, and they have their occupation before they've taken their first breath. And yeah, what a fun life that looks like.
So when you're looking at that type of capability, if you have 3,000 years, and let's say you're 72 today, and suddenly you know that not only are you going to have 3,000 years, you'll grow younger over the next 20 years until you reach a happy medium of about 45 in physical age, fully capable and fully adult, and no problems with youth or any of that stuff. Perfect health from now to the day you die, which will be because of your polymeres or whatever, some dictating factor. Your
death would have to be accidental or murder.
Right. That opens up access to some very interesting futuristic concepts, because you no longer need hibernation sleep. You no longer need the ability to do transhuman process. You no longer need all of this super high-tech stuff to do the things that most humans would like to do with space, right?
Right.
You could feasibly, if you, with enough money, enough effort, and enough time, which time and money seem to be the primary thing that they have, and you can pay for effort. If you apply it right, build a space station, and build the space station to be the ship rather than making a ship. You can take all the time in the world you need to build up whatever speed you need. Stopping at the other end becomes an issue, because you can't plan that yet.
Yeah, it does. And that's the thing that often doesn't get considered in science fiction stories, is stopping at your destination.
I mean, if you could fill up on the way there, that would be different. If you could just pull over at Pluto and top off the tanks before you jump out into deep space.
Yeah. I guess that's the pretty non-sexy part of the story. But the fact of the matter is, you're going to need just as much energy and just as much propellant slowing down from full speed as you did getting up to full speed. And I guess don't tell that to Rian Johnson.
Right.
When he made goddamn The Last Jedi. If they keep burning fuel at this rate, there's no way they can stop us. Because to fly through space, you need to have your foot on the gas the whole time and be burning your engines constantly. I mean, why don't film directors understand how space works? Why is this so goddamn difficult?
Go watch The Expanse. Anyone who's curious about the physics of space, go watch The Expanse. They show you how it works and what happens when it breaks. When space breaks and it no longer works the way we expect it to, there's an entire season based around something more powerful than us changing the laws of physics, and it is brilliant. Every bit of it, absolutely.
And since you brought that up, I was happy with the way Battlestar Galactica, the most recent Battlestar Galactica, handled that, because in the 1970s Battlestar Galactica, your fighter planes are just, they fly like fighter planes would fly on Earth. But in the second Battlestar Galactica series, it is depicted far more realistically because they have omnidirectional thrusters on them, and they can turn any way they want to turn because they're in space, and it doesn't matter how fast they're going. If they want to turn this way, they have to turn on this thruster and that thruster and this thruster, and it's not a big sweeping aircraft style turn like you normally get depicted in the first series and in Star Wars and in most other science fiction. And I remember the first time I watched that show, I was impressed that they went to that much effort to try and depict that realistically. Of course, you wouldn't have the fighters being shaped as aerodynamically as they are, but you have to make certain concessions for television, and you want the ships to look sexy, so that's fine.
That's why they look almost exactly like X-Wings without the X-Wings.
Exactly.
Okay, so hypothetically speaking, all of these developments take place. Every single one of them. We've got AI and humanoid robots running around doing physical labor. Think iRobot, but without Vicky. But then we also have Vicky out here operating humaniform robots by tether. And in addition to that, we have cyborgs, full-on humans that have been transitioned into humaniform robots, like RoboBrains, right?
Right.
And next to them, we have Methuselahs. All of these versions of activity are essentially immortal. What does this change?
There's going to be a competition among all those groups to see who the world hegemon becomes. That's for damn sure.
So what you're saying is chances are one of these will succeed and the rest will be failed.
Yes, because the others will be destroyed by the one that prevails.
Right. That will be the method. So I'm standing by my previous theory that this is going to be a byproduct of them planting an AI communicator into a pre-nascent child, and that child living its entire life as a perfectly ordinary human, possibly with access to the internet in its brain. Or maybe an imaginary friend that's not so imaginary kind of situation. And then later, when the organic element of this organism dies, the AI version goes on believing itself to be, for lack of a better term, the soul of this individual.
And whether that becomes possible and feasible is only half of the question. The other half is that activity banned by the world's governments just as human cloning has been?
Exactly. What do we do? What is the reaction to some individual who we experience their death, we place them in the ground, they are dead, and yet you can go talk to them online anytime you get ready? How does that legally play out?
And then even if the world's governments do make it taboo and do make it illegal and do draw that ethical line underneath it, there will still be rogue actors who want to do it anyway, as there always are, because that always happens.
Right.
I mean, who the hell knows? There could be cloned human beings that exist already, and they just haven't been rolled out yet. I would place that possibility as distinctly non-zero.
So quite often you hear the term that the government science programs are 20 years ahead of the curve. They're 50 years ahead. They're 100 years ahead. Being conservative and looking at the doubling of technology, I can't remember the name of the law. Is it like
oh God, I know the name.
You know, is Max?
Let me look it up.
Look it up
before we both break our brains.
If that's the case, then by the mid 80s, when Deep Blue was being paraded around as the best large language model in existence, the exponential growth of technology from that point to this point of them busting out a Grok 2 or whatever it is they're working with currently as being the best large language model, and the two seem to be about functional with each other. This makes me wonder what stage of strong AI have we reached as opposed to the weak AI of language models and logarithms.
It's Moore's Law. Do you want me to read out the summary?
Moore's Law, that's it. Read it out.
Moore's Law predicts the number of transistors on a chip would double roughly every 2 years, leading to exponential growth in computing power. Other laws, like Amdahl's law, describe how adding more processors can lead to diminishing returns due to the limits of parallelization. While the physical scaling described by Moore's law is facing limitations, computing power continues to grow through other means such as architectural improvements, AI integration, and specialized chips. The original geometric scaling of Moore's law is becoming increasingly difficult to maintain due to physical limits like quantum effects at the atomic scale. However, the industry continues to innovate to achieve similar gains in performance per watt and per dollar.
All right, so if you add in super wealthy individual who's immortal to that, the wattage and dollars no longer matter, and the actual size and structure of it is less important than what it can do. So you can gimmick Moore's law rather than by adding transistors. You literally add entire computer structures.
And once the immortal humans have instituted their world government, does it become the singular objective of all the world's mortal humans to kill the immortal humans? It would have to be, I would think.
I mean, have you ever heard of have you ever gone into any of the Halo stories at all?
No, I know like the broad strokes, but I've never read any of them in particular.
I'm fixing to go into a bit of esoterica here, but I think it bears mentioning in the circumstance that we're looking at.
Lay it on me.
Okay, so there was a encounter between a human ship and an alien ship. This human ship, after encountering this violent and aggressive alien species, instituted at the behest of their captain what came to be known as the Cole Protocol. If a human ship comes into contact with any form of extraterrestrial, every human on that ship is deemed non-human until they can get away from the extraterrestrial. This is even in the event of a friendly meeting where we exchange unicorns and mouse farts, right? It's like doves flying in the air. God is standing there. We still immediately commit Cole's Protocol. And Cole's Protocol is we jump no less than 5 or 10 times to random coordinates before we go back to anything associated with Earth. That ship can never, ever go back to Earth and must operate merely on colonies, and at that, only smaller colonies that are completely non-military targets. The whole point of this is, in the event that this meeting with an alien intellect ends up with a subversion of the crew or the captain or any aspect of its computer system or compromised, that ship cannot bring that compromised material back to Earth at all. It doesn't happen, because the second you meet aliens, you already know you're not going home ever.
And that's probably not too far off from what it would be in the actual event.
All right. Before, all right. So that's not all. Yeah, no, Fletch has a point here. It also means that after that first jump away from the meeting, all of the records that are necessary to exchange information back to Earth are literally written on paper by people, right? And they're wiped from every computer system in the ship. The ship is slowly dismantled over the next handful of jumps so as to be completely uncontrollable without the human crew at the helm. All automated systems are taken offline. Everything that can record data is eliminated. This is because the assumption is that the aliens will eventually take the ship. And when it does, all it's going to get is some really frazzled ass humans and a piece of junk that they've been sitting around beating like monkeys with rocks for the past month.
Yeah. Frazzled ass is a good way of putting it, because that's what they would be.
Right. And because the protocol states that you essentially run for your life, and you run to the most distant colony of humanity in the off chance that they don't find you. And then, and this is a really critical part that drives me crazy, after you've done all that running, you shut down somewhere in the outer system, you go cold up against a cold rock somewhere, and you operate on the very minimalist of power and wait for some undetermined amount of time to see whether or not they followed you. And if they did, You then jump right into the middle of the very first ship that pops out of that fucking hole. you scuttle your ship with their ship.
That's a set of protocols that is not messing around.
No, they're not. It is very serious, and I love it. It's one of my favorite military books. In fact, it's right up there with the Sharon Travis series of clone troopers that basically laid out the religious doctrine of the Mandalorians.
You do love your Mandalorians.
I do love my Mandalorians. Don't test me on that. We'll go to the.
Are you looking cautiously forward to the Mandalorian movie, or are you assuming it's going to suck?
I'm assuming it's going to suck, and I'm going to watch it anyway because I'm an absolute Mandalorian fanatic. I don't care about Disney anymore, but damn it, I mean, I've got a Boba Fett keychain. You can't take that from me.
It's too bad that everybody started liking Baby Yoda so much.
This whatever. That's fine. I don't have a problem with it. It's the puppy effect, dude. What upsets me was the fact that they made such solid gold with the first season, and then they allowed.
I know that show was badass at the start, dude. It was seriously, legitimately badass.
The first season is solid. Now, granted, the first season is like 9 different historical myths. We should go over the first season. We can skip the second season entirely if you like. But the first season is basically, one is the 7 Samurai, one is Lone Wolf and Pup, one is what's the other one? The one where the guy slays the dragon in the swamps, George and the Dragon or whatever. I can't remember.
Yeah. The foundation myth of England.
Yes, it's a bunch of foundational myths of human culture and all of history, and it's laid out right there as a smorgasbord of visual, tactile, and amazing writing. I love every bit of the first season. I can't find anything in it I don't like, and I don't really have a problem with the second season until Homeboy pulls his mask off, and suddenly it becomes obvious that this is going to take one of those cancel culture woke libtard turns where everybody's an individual and a special snowflake and everybody's their own main character. And it all starts with Carano, Gina Carano, is that right?
Yep.
Beating up and getting beat up. Which, I mean, I loved her role. She did very well. Like I said, the first
She was fantastic. She was everybody's favorite thing about the show. But she said the wrong thing on Twitter, so she had to be destroyed.
Beep, beep, boop. Imagine it. Beep, beep, boop.
Talk about franchises shooting themselves in the foot. Great job, Kathy Kennedy. You had a show that everybody liked. You had an actress and a role that everybody loved, but you couldn't handle one political opinion that she expressed, so you had to fire her ass. And then you had to go to court with her, and she won the lawsuit, and you wound up having to pay her $40 million. Very well done. Excellent way of running a studio.
You got a little crackly there. Talk to me. Oh, I think I screwed you up entirely. Keep talking.
The first time.
All right. I think we got it. Well, we got to get you cleaned up before we do our outro because, so speak.
As we know, Thanksgiving became a national holiday in 1863 on a proclamation by President Abraham Lincoln. We also know the legend of the first Thanksgiving at Plymouth Colony. However, documented Thanksgiving services in what are currently the United States were conducted as early as the 16th century by the Spaniards and the French. These days of Thanksgiving were celebrated through church services and feasting. Historian Michael Garrison claims that St. Augustine, Florida was founded with a shared Thanksgiving meal in September of 1565. The Thanksgiving at St. Augustine was celebrated 56 years before the Puritan Pilgrim Thanksgiving at Plymouth, now Massachusetts, but did not become the origin of the national annual tradition.
Wiggle your wire. Touch the wire that you said you were having a problem with. How about now? We just lost you entirely. Damn it. Well, technical issues are part of the show. See,
How about
think-
now?
Oh, beautiful babies. Dear Lord, thank God. Here, do the thing.
Ladies and gentlemen, thanks ever so much for joining us here on the Blast Radius tonight. We wish you a fantastic Thanksgiving weekend. We hope your family members don't drink all your beer and scream about politics too much. We hope they make themselves just as tolerable as they can be and don't stay too long and leave when you want them to leave. And yeah, we hope you have a great day and a pleasant tomorrow. We hope you enjoyed tonight's discussion. I thought it was pretty good. I don't know about you. I thought it was pretty high-minded, pretty wide-ranging. Even though we talked about cricket a little bit, I know some of you don't like cricket, but that's okay. I'm going to be kitted out in my cricket gear until the Ashes end on the first week of January, so you might as well get used to it. And I'm going to talk about every match between now and then, so consider yourselves to have been fairly warned. Have a great day and a pleasant tomorrow and an edifying day after that. Happy Thanksgiving. We will see you next time. Get off my lawn.